I used to believe that the people closest to you are the ones who protect you when the world turns ugly. I was wrong. Sometimes, the person who knows you best is also the one who knows exactly how to destroy you. And when that happens, it doesn't just ruin your life, it changes who you become. Sophie had been my best friend for as long as I could remember. We grew up sharing secrets, inside jokes, and late-night conversations that felt sacred. When we both ended up working at the same company, it felt like fate. We joked that we'd climb the corporate ladder together, side by side, cheering each other on. For over a year, we were both up for the same promotion. I truly believed it was friendly competition. We'd vent about work over drinks, laugh about office politics, and promise each other that no matter who got it, we'd still be okay. At least that's what I believed. The night everything changed, I was tipsy, exhausted, and stressed beyond belief. I was venting to Sophie the way I always had. I complained about my boss, joked sarcastically about how ridiculous promotions felt, and made an obviously unserious joke about sleeping with the CEO to get ahead. It was crude, yes, but it was private, exaggerated, and never meant to leave that conversation. Sophie laughed at the time. She didn't tell me to stop. She didn't warn me. She didn't act offended. She just listened, nodded, and let me keep talking, like best friends do. A week later, I got the promotion. I was glowing when I told her. I expected a hug, maybe fake excitement if nothing else. Instead, her smile didn't reach her eyes. She congratulated me quickly and changed the subject. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking things. 2 days later, I was called into my boss's office. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He just slid printed pages across the desk, screenshots of my private messages. My stomach dropped as I recognized my own words staring back at me, out of context, stripped of tone, made to look intentional and malicious. He said the company couldn't risk someone with my attitude. I tried to explain. I begged him to understand it was a joke, a private vent, nothing more. It didn't matter. By the end of that meeting, I no longer had a job. I walked out of that building numb, replaying every message in my head, trying to understand how they had ended up there. Only one person had them. Only one person I trusted. When I got home, the day somehow got worse. My boyfriend was standing in the living room with boxes at his feet. His face was cold, distant. Before I could even ask what was happening, he showed me his phone. More screenshots, this time messages where I had vented about his mother, about how suffocating her control over our lives had become. He told me his mother always came first. If I couldn't respect that, then I wasn't the one. He walked out that same day, leaving me in a silent apartment filled with echoes of everything I'd lost. As if that wasn't enough, the final blow came shortly after. An edited version of my messages appeared on social media, posts twisted to make it look like I hated my friends, mocked them, and thought I was better than everyone else. I tried to explain. I told people the screenshots were manipulated. No one listened. Friends stopped replying. Group chats went quiet. Invitations disappeared. I went from having a full life to sitting alone, staring at my phone, wondering how everything had collapsed so fast. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I wasn't thinking about forgiveness. I wasn't thinking about being the bigger person. I was thinking about the fact that Sophie had taken my career, my relationship, and my reputation and walked away untouched. I didn't know how to get revenge. I wasn't some criminal mind master. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, replaying scenarios that went nowhere. I was angry, humiliated, and completely lost. Then one night, a thought cut through the noise. I knew Sophie better than anyone. Her secrets, her weaknesses, her lies. And that's when everything finally clicked. Once the idea settled in my mind, it refused to leave. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I was thinking constantly. Every memory of Sophie started resurfacing, not as nostalgia, but as ammunition. Things she had trusted me with, things I had protected for years without question. The biggest one rose to the surface almost immediately. Sophie had been involved with a married man. It wasn't a rumor, it wasn't speculation, it was something she had admitted to me years ago, swearing me to secrecy. I remember how shaken she had been the first time she told me, how she cried and said she never meant for it to go that far. I had never approved of it. I told her repeatedly that she deserved someone fully available, someone without a wife and kids. But it was always a sensitive subject, and eventually I stopped pushing. I kept my mouth shut, because that's what best friends do. Until she destroyed my life. As I sat there scrolling through old messages, I remembered one night in particular, the night that had convinced me Sophie was far more reckless than she ever admitted. It had started with her calling me, frantic and dressed up, asking for advice. She told me she had a date planned with him that evening. His wife thought he was on a business trip. Sophie sounded nervous but excited, like she always did when it came to him. She asked me what she should do if he started pulling away again. I told her the same thing I always did, to walk away. I reminded her there were plenty of men in the world who weren't married, who didn't come with lies and complications. She didn't want to hear any of it. About an hour before their reservation, he stopped responding to her messages. She showed me the texts. Just minutes earlier, he had been telling her how much he missed her, how excited he was to see her. Sophie was already dressed, wearing a gown I'd never seen her in before. Her hair was curled, something she almost never bothered with. She had even done her makeup, heavy eyeliner, bold lips, the exact style he had once told her he loved on women. I remember noticing how much effort she'd put in, how desperately she wanted to be chosen. When she finally got him on the phone, he claimed he had a flat tire and needed to cancel. I told her again that this was her sign to end it. She ignored me. Instead, she checked his location through an app she had access to. He wasn't stuck on the side of the road, he was at a nightclub nearly 2 hours away. Her voice changed instantly, turning sharp and determined. She said she was going to drive there. At first, I refused to go with her. I told her I didn't want to be involved in whatever confrontation she was planning. She accused me of not being a real friend, said she needed someone there to make sure she was safe. Against my better judgment, I agreed. 2 hours later, we pulled up outside the club. The line was long, and the bass thumped through the walls. Sophie didn't hesitate. She flirted with the security guard until he let us cut ahead, then pushed through the crowd like she was on a mission. I stayed back, watching as she scanned the room. When she finally spotted him, my stomach dropped. He was sitting in a private section, surrounded by women. One of them leaned in and kissed him, then climbed into his lap like she belonged there. Sophie froze. Then she exploded. She rushed toward him, shouting, demanding to know how he could do this after everything they'd been through. 2 years. That's how long she'd been seeing him. 2 years of promises, excuses, and hints that he would leave his wife once things were stable. He looked shocked when he saw her, stumbling over excuses. The music was loud, the lights harsh, and the scene was humiliating in every possible way. Sophie told me to wait in the car. I did exactly that, sitting alone, replaying the moment over and over. When she finally came out, her makeup was smudged and her voice unsteady. She told me it was all a misunderstanding, that they were fine, that he had explained everything. I didn't question her. I didn't push. I didn't care enough to fight her denial. But now, sitting alone with nothing left, that night played in my head differently. I went through old texts, photos, location screenshots, anything that proved what I had witnessed and what she had admitted. I realized how much evidence I had without ever intending to collect it. And for the first time since my life collapsed, I felt something shift. I wasn't helpless anymore. I stared at my phone for a long time before doing anything. My thumb hovered over the screen as doubt crept in, but it didn't last long. Sophie hadn't hesitated when she destroyed me. She hadn't questioned whether I deserved mercy. That thought hardened something inside me. I gathered everything carefully. Screenshots of messages where he told her he loved her, photos she'd sent me from hotels and restaurants, even the location logs she'd once shown me proudly, proof she thought made her special. At the time, I'd hated seeing them. Now they felt like leverage. I didn't send anything from my own accounts. I was meticulous. I created a new email address, one that couldn't be traced back to me. I drafted the message slowly, pretending to be someone who had recently discovered the truth and felt the wife deserved to know. When I finally hit send, my hands were shaking. For a day, nothing happened. I checked my phone obsessively, refreshing feeds, waiting for some kind of reaction. I told myself I didn't care, but my chest tightened every time a notification buzzed. Then, the explosion came. The wife didn't handle it quietly. She didn't confront her husband behind closed doors or call a lawyer in silence. She went public. Screenshots flooded social media. Names were dropped. Timelines were laid out for everyone to see. Sophie's name was everywhere. People who once praised her suddenly distanced themselves. Comments turned vicious. Friends I knew recognized the story immediately, and whispers spread faster than facts ever had in my case. I watched it all unfold from a distance, my emotions tangled. I felt relief, vindication, and something darker I didn't want to name. For the first time since losing everything, I slept through the night. But satisfaction didn't last long. Once the initial shock wore off, I realized how empty my days still were. I had no job to go to, no partner to come home to, no friends checking in on me. Watching Sophie fall didn't rebuild my life, it just distracted me from its ruins. That's when I turned my attention to her career. Sophie worked at a marketing firm, where image was everything. I knew how carefully she curated her professional persona, how obsessed she was with looking polished, progressive, and reliable. One crack in that image could shatter everything. I created a fake social media account using her name and photos. I bought followers, likes, and engagement until it looked real enough to pass a casual glance. I even copied the way she wrote captions, the emoji she used, the timing of her posts. For a week, I did nothing suspicious. I let the account breathe, build history, look authentic. Then slowly, I started posting comments under trending topics. Nothing outrageous at first, just controversial enough to raise eyebrows. Over time, I escalated. The comments grew sharper, more inappropriate. Screenshots started circulating. People tagged the account, asking if it was really her. Reports piled up. That's when I made my next move. I sent an anonymous email to her company's HR department, posing as a concerned coworker. I attached screenshots of the account, claiming Sophie had been making similar remarks in the office and that it was affecting team morale. The response was swift. Within days, Sophie was called in for a meeting. I didn't know exactly what was said behind closed doors, but I knew the timing wasn't a coincidence. The affair scandal was still fresh, her reputation already damaged. By the end of the week, she was fired. When I found out, I sat back and exhaled slowly. It felt like balance had been restored. She no longer had the career she'd protected at the cost of my life. And yet, even then, I wasn't done. There was still one part of her life untouched. Her love life. After her job fell apart, Sophie tried to hold on to the one thing she thought was still stable. She leaned into her relationship with Ryan, the man she had been seeing quietly alongside everything else. He was safe, predictable, and devoted in a way Drew never was. Ryan had always been different from the rest of our circle. He was introverted, private, and barely existed online. No social media, no public opinions, no digital footprint to speak of. That made him harder to reach, but not impossible. I knew him well enough to know his weaknesses. He valued honesty above all else. He had been burned before, and Sophie had positioned herself as the woman who would never betray him. That irony almost made me laugh. The first challenge was finding a way to reach him. After hours of searching, I found his email, the only digital thread he left behind. It felt invasive, but at that point, my moral compass was already broken. I started slowly. The first email was vague, anonymous, and non-accusatory, just enough to plant doubt. I hinted that Sophie wasn't being completely truthful, and that he might want to look more closely at who she really was. He didn't respond. A few days later, I sent another email. This one included subtle details only someone close to Sophie would know. Still, no response, but I knew he was reading them. Silence doesn't always mean indifference. Then, I escalated. I sent screenshots of her conversations with Drew, carefully selected, impossible to misinterpret, messages where affection crossed into betrayal, promises that should never have been made. I framed it as concern, as someone who believed Ryan deserved the truth. That's when things shifted. His replies were short at first, confused, defensive. He asked questions, demanded proof, tried to rationalize what he was seeing. I answered calmly, methodically, letting the evidence speak for itself. To make it worse, I added fabricated proof. Not completely invented, just exaggerated. Conversations with other men, flirtatious exchanges, enough to make her betrayal feel habitual rather than accidental. Over weeks, I chipped away at his trust piece by piece. Eventually, he stops defending her. The breakup wasn't public at first, but I knew when it happened. Sophie posted a vague message on Instagram about heartbreak and betrayal, something poetic and non-specific. Seeing it made my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. For a brief moment, I almost felt guilty. Then I reminded myself that she would have dropped Ryan in a heartbeat if Drew had ever followed through on his promises. That thought hardened me again. By now, Sophie was unraveling. No job, no affair partner, no stable relationship, but there was still one thing she had that I didn't: a roof over her head. Sophie lived in a downtown apartment she could barely afford. I remembered how often she'd complain about rent, how she'd avoid outings because money was tight. She cared deeply about appearances, especially around her coworkers who lived in the same area. She had told me once that missing a few rent payments had almost cost her the place. I used that. I emailed her landlord pretending to be a credit company, hinting that her financial situation was unstable and that she might default again soon. I made it sound official enough to raise concern without being outright fraudulent. At the same time, I spread quiet rumors within her apartment complex that she was unstable, that she had been involved in a public scandal, that neighbors should be cautious. Complaints started piling up. The landlord, eager to avoid risk, acted quickly. With her income gone and her reputation damaged, she had no leverage. She was evicted. When I heard she was couch surfing, staying wherever she could, something twisted inside me. I told myself it was justice, that I was simply giving back what she had taken. But the truth was harder to face. I had taken everything from her, and for the first time, I wondered if there was anything left of me, either. After Sophie lost her apartment, word spread quickly. People who once admired her suddenly treated her like a cautionary tale. Invitations stopped, messages went unanswered. She bounced between couches, staying with friends who offered sympathy at first and distance soon after. I watched all of it quietly. I never reached out. I never checked on her directly. I told myself that she hadn't checked on me either when my life collapsed. That silence felt justified, necessary even. Eventually, our old friend group began gathering again, just without her. Birthdays, small get-togethers, casual brunches. Her name came up less and less, as if erasing her made things easier for everyone. Ryan and I started talking more after his breakup with Sophie. At first, it was innocent. I told him how sorry I was for what she had put him through. He thanked me for being honest, for being a real friend when he needed one. He asked me out for brunch one weekend. I agreed, smiling in a way that felt victorious at the time. Sitting across from him, I felt like I had somehow won, not just revenge, but replacement. For a while, that feeling carried me, but it didn't last. I realized that every conversation circled back to Sophie. I brought her up constantly, what she had done, how she had fallen, how she deserved it. Ryan listened at first, then less patiently. Eventually, he told me the truth. He said it felt like I wasn't interested in him at all, only in talking about her. That every date felt like a continuation of her shadow, not a new beginning. Not long after that, he stopped calling. Around the same time, I had started a new job, one I was more than qualified for, one I had hoped would help me rebuild my confidence and stability. On paper, everything should have been improving. Instead, my performance slipped. I couldn't focus. My mind was always somewhere else, replaying Sophie's downfall, checking for updates, wondering if she was hurting enough yet. I spent more time obsessing over her life than building my own. Slowly, I became isolated, angry, bitter, hollow. One night, I was sitting alone in my living room, the TV playing something meaningless in the background. The screen went dark during a scene change, and I caught my reflection staring back at me. I barely recognized myself. I had won. I had taken her job, her relationship, her home, everything she had taken from me, and yet nothing inside me felt repaired. A few days later, I saw Sophie in public for the first time since everything happened. She was sitting alone at a coffee shop, staring at her phone. Her shoulders were slumped, her clothes plain, her confidence gone. She looked tired, smaller somehow, like the world had hollowed her out. She didn't see me. I stood there longer than I should have, watching her from a distance, waiting for that rush of victory to return. It never did. Instead, I felt something heavy settle in my chest. She wasn't the vibrant, ambitious woman I once called my best friend. She wasn't even the villain I had built in my head. She was just broken. And so was I. Walking away, I finally understood what revenge had cost me. It hadn't restored my life. It hadn't healed my wounds. It had consumed me, reshaped me into someone I didn't recognize. I thought destroying her would bring me back to myself. But revenge doesn't give you your life back. It just takes more of it. Now, I'm left with the aftermath. No friendship, no peace, and a version of myself I have to confront. I lost her, yes, but somewhere along the way, I lost myself too. And I still don't know if any of it was worth it.